So please, as you think of them, write them down so we don't forget, because we've got a wealth of information up here. Next, we have Chaz Miller. And I'm telling you guys these personal things about them, so maybe if you see them just around, you may find something in common. Plus, they're just good resources, good people to talk to. So Chaz, he's a big Maryland lacrosse fan. The most interesting thing is, well, get this, he's been around since the first curbside bin. Wow. Do you think he's got a little bit of information? And he started with the EPA in the bicentennial. Come on, Chaz.
Thank you. You know, the reality of recycling market prices right now is they're up, down, and sideways. Paper, it's been going up. It's been going up for the last 12 months. Metals are flat, but they're flat at a great price. As for plastics, 3 of the 4 are below or at the prices they were in the first 3 months before COVID, and that is a lousy place to be. And the other one is above it, but it's far from its potential. Paper is clearly the king of recycling markets. Now, I focus on MRFs. I focus on MRFs for 2 reasons, one of which is that's where the politics of recycling. They really follow those prices, because that's what local governments get, or less. And that's what they rely upon. And I focus upon the 8 bailed values. I use recyclingmarkets.net data. And we all know that MRFs produce less consistent quality in materials than do commercial sources. And they do that for a very simple reason. They depend on you and me and about 300 million other Americans to do the sorting, the basic setting out of materials. None of us have any vested interest in the quality, whereas the commercial sources do. So let's go through prices very, very quickly. I am not going to spend much time on that at all. And this is through January, but I'll also update it a little bit. Corrugated, $87.50 a ton at the end of January. Now it's around $94. You see that line. It's been going up for a year. RMP, another. Look at that line. It's been going up for a year. Right now, it was $48.44 national at the end of January. It's up to about $56 a ton now. But then we get into plastics, and I get depressed. This is natural HDP. That's a lousy price. I'm sorry. There's absolutely no excuse. It's really a reflection of the buyers of natural HDP and the failure of packaging companies to come up with their commitments to buy. It's below where it was pre-COVID, and it's shown not much life. Color HDP has shown more life. It's a good price. It was down a little bit at the end of the, but it's a minor variable, although that's a market that relies on construction, because you cannot take the dye out of a colored HDPE, which is the flaw, by the way, of recycled content laws. So you're stuck with this gray or black or weird color, but who cares when it comes to construction pipe, for water, for sewage? We don't see it, they don't care about the price. And that price tends to correlate with the sale of new homes and new home construction starts. PET, usually sort of the king of plastics, but you know, it's had its ups and downs. It's going up though steadily, although it started up from a very, very low price. But I hear a lot of good things about PET from buyers. And finally, polypropylene. Now that, my friends, is flat. And it's 5.5 cents per pound. It's just the markets that it has, durable products, are not very good markets right now, so the demand is just much lighter than it's been in the past. Aluminum cans, it's kind of flat, but it's moving. It's a little over 60 cents a pound. It's a good price for aluminum, and considering the collapse of beer, collapse may not be a fair term, but considering the beer consumption is at a 25-year low, of course there's less demand for cans. And that's put a halt to some expansion problems in that industry for recycling. And finally, steel. It's a good price, it's a solid price. It'd be better if I changed the slide. It's a great price. It's a solid price. There's interest in it. A little bit flat. It's around 212, 220 a ton, but it's moving nicely. You look at price changes in February. This is actually 6 since the end of January. It's more than I normally see occurring within the market. Most of them are up. See, color HDP went down just a little bit, and polypropylene actually moved, barely. Now let's change this where we get really into the politics of recycling, what really counts when it comes to what local governments are looking about. I'm very involved in the politics of recycling and garbage in the state of Maryland. And these are the kind of values you end up really talking about. You look at what aluminum is, $1,300 a ton. That's a nice price. Next to it is natural HTP, a little around 450 a ton. And then it just goes down, and you look at how small corrugated and residential mix are. They barely show up on this chart. But if you do a chart of a ton of material out of a MRF, and we've been tracking this at the Northeast Recycling Council since the second quarter of 2019, you see how low those prices are through 2019 and 2020. They're all under 60, and some of them are under 40. And then all of a sudden prices shot up, and everybody may remember the third quarter of 2021 when people were begging you for material and paying absolutely outlandish prices, almost got up to 180 a ton for a bale out of MRF, including the cost of residue. And then it goes down, but you notice at the end it's not down as bad. And why is that? It's paper. Paper drives recycling in value. Yeah, aluminum's nice, yeah, PET's nice, but it's paper. Think of recycling markets as a cake. Paper is the cake, and everything else is simply icing. And right now the cake is stalling, and that's giving a nice soft landing to those MRF values, that it's having an impact on some of the politics that goes on in state capitals. So what about other markets? The ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, you know, I speak at conferences, and I ask the audience, why do we recycle and export what we've collected? And I get a lot of weird answers, but the bottom line is very simple. Somebody wants it more than we do, and they're willing to pay more than local markets. But the real story of exports is decline. Paper markets, over 20 million tons in 2016, down to 14.23 million tons in 2023. It's an extraordinary change in the level and the amount. It's partially because of the Chinese ban. It's partially because of increased domestic capacity and demand. India, Thailand, Mexico, they received just a little under half. Yet imports to India are down substantially, and Mexico also. Some analysis by Resource Recycling recently showed that 2/3 of the exports are OCC, and another 15% are RMP. And those OCC exports have actually increased because those markets overseas are looking for better quality OCC, while RMP has decreased. The good news is that excess container capacity has lowered container rentals. The bad news, if you're on the East Coast and you're used to going east through the Mediterranean, down the Red Sea, don't do that anymore. Why? People are taking pot shots at your ships. So now you're going all the way around the southern tip of Africa. That adds about 2 weeks of time and a lot of money to the price of using those exports. Let's look at plastics. And it's worth noting, you know, plastics we cite in millions of pounds, whereas, or billions of pounds, whereas paper is in terms of millions of tons. It's a big difference. When you really compare the numbers between exports of paper versus plastic or metal versus plastic, plastics are nothing. They're less than 10% of what you see out of the other materials. But for political reasons, it's also always sexier to use it in billions of pounds, but now because of the decline, you can only talk about millions of pounds. From a little over 3.5 billion pounds in 2017 down to 923 million pounds in this last year. It's an extraordinary decline over such a short period of time. But then you look from 2019, the decline has been a little slower, and it's going to get even slower. There are two countries that get more than half of our recycled plastics. It's Canada and Mexico, and their share has been slowly increasing over the last 5 years. They're great markets. They want the plastics. They know what to do with them. It's primarily film, and it's primarily non-bottle rigids. Again, some analysis from Resource Recycling. Mixed plastics and polyethylene grades are each about 37% of the exports. We rarely export PET and the HDPEs because it's just markets here are better. So let's talk about new recycled content capacity. This particular little machine is going into the Norpac mill in Longview, Washington. At NERC, we've been tracking the increase in recycled domestic capacity for paper since 2017. And we've noticed that there have been 23 completed either expansions, conversions of existing capacity from printed paper, and let's face it, this stuff is disappearing, to packaging, or simply brand new mills or brand new machines. That's a stunning amount of increase in just such a short period of time. And it's had a major impact. Just last year, those 5 plants opened: Domtar, Cascades, Atlantic Packaging, Nine Dragons with a new machine there and a new machine in Ontario, and then Pratt in Kentucky. Opening sometime this spring, Total Fiber Recovery in Virginia, but then a 2-year gap before we get to the graphics packaging mill in Texas. Now, it's all nice and good to see you've got all this new capacity, millions of tons of new capacity. What about the existing capacity? Well, it's starting to go down because you're seeing a lot of paper companies closing old, inefficient, expensive mills because you have more efficient, expensive mills operating now. So the overall capacity is going down. And actually, 2 of the facilities we have in the NERC report took total economic downtime. They closed completely last year. The one in Washington has reopened one machine. They're opening the other machine this quarter because they were having trouble finding buyers. It's a very different market out there, as everybody knows. This is the ExxonMobil Baytown, Texas chemical recycling plant, although they don't like to call it chemical, but I can't remember what their term is. Plastics capacity is harder to track than paper because these tend not to require bonds. They tend to be, a lot of them are in-company operations. They tend to be much less expensive. I mean, that was not an inexpensive facility, but they tend to be much less expensive than what you see on the paper side. But we used to see a lot of press releases announcing new capacity, then you'd never hear another word. Now we're hearing press releases announcing operating capacity. PET, film, polypropylene, PET, film, all last year, along with HDP and PP, which has just started. And EFS has announced they're expanding capacity at Pennsylvania and Alberta this year and next. They're a big buyer of mixed plastics in particular. So it is happening, but there's a problem here. It's called supply. These are all built in the expectation that the supply will increase, and we're discovering that Americans are very stubborn when it comes to buying, putting out the recyclables correctly and putting them out cleanly. And that's going to continue to be an issue for plastics recycling. So let's talk a little bit about paper, and I'm going to leave it to Ryan to really get into the nitty-gritty on paper. Ryan is smarter than I am, even on one of his off days. He really knows the subject well, so I'm going to let Ryan do it. I'm going to hit on just a couple of basic points. One thing that is clear, everybody in the room knows it, box demand is down due to lower product sales. More than 2 million tons of economic downtime in the last 12 months. That's a lot of time when you turn off a mill or you turn off a machine. Some companies, in their quarterly reports, they're reporting slightly improved box sales in the 3rd quarter, the 4th quarter. There's a lot of cautious optimism in those quarterly reports. They sort of sound like somebody whistling their way through a graveyard, but they're convinced that things have turned around. And I think there's some truth. Mill inventory rates are down, but operating rates are, mid-80s. The supply of OCC and RMP is down. It's down because product sales and declines in imports have led to big box stores generating less clean, consistent, good quality boxes. And that means, will residential supply increase? And that's the big question out there. We know that the new 2023 capacity is aggressively competing for OCC and for RMP. And you may have noticed on the slide, all those mills are east of the Mississippi. In fact, if you look at all the new capacity, 22, 23, and what's coming online this year, with one exception, they are all east of the Mississippi. And so you've really hit that area hard. Now I talk to MRF guys who are out in the Midwest or the Plains or further west, and they're saying, yeah, they're getting calls from mills they'd never heard of before when it came to selling their OCC, selling their RMP. So that's very aggressive. And as for e-commerce, 15.6% retail sales share in the third quarter. Fourth quarter data will probably be released later this week. Fourth quarter is always the peak for e-commerce. But one thing to think about e-commerce is the real savior of the box industry. Census has been tracking e-commerce's retail market share since about 2004. And for years, it was just a very slow, very steady increase, just slow. And then all of a sudden COVID hit, and it goes up like that. Third quarter set a record, then it goes down. And now you look at the data, it's back on that very slow increase level. The question is, how high will it get? It's here to stay, but I think in-store is king. We're a social species. We like to go out and see people. So yeah, you'll see a little more e-commerce, but I question how serious that trend is going to be. Plus, we've noticed Amazon and other e-commerce outfits are trying to make the boxes or the pouches as light as possible. Plastics. Well, consumer sales, they're down. U.S. capacity, plastic, 83%. Anybody here who does plastics know there's an abundant ocean of off-spec and wide-spec virgin resin available for you to buy. There's a massive global polyethylene overcapacity, this extraordinary overhang over that industry. And the supply, frankly, it exceeds demand. This is a tough time to be doing plastics recycling. We all know that. Recycled plastic, good news is the PET bottle resin and HDPE resin prices are rising. I think that's because the supplies, those inventories are pretty much empty now. They're pretty much destocked, so they got to pay more. But that has not yet shifted to MRFs. MRFs are not yet really seeing that bump, although some of the people I talked to are saying, for PET in particular, they're very optimistic as the year goes on that it's going to continue to increase. We are seeing virgin PE and polypropylene resin prices rising. But look at Europe, the homeland of recycled content. Plastic recycled content, plastic resin prices have been declining in Europe since June of 22 because there are other factors that impact prices than recycled content requirements. And they're not a magic solution. They're there, they can do some good, but they're not a magic key. Let's look at metals and glass markets very quickly. For the second straight year, distilled spirits sales exceeded beer sales. Beer consumption at its lowest in 25 years. So of course there's problems and there's some issues on the aluminum side, and we've seen some cancellations and delays and expansions of aluminum can capacity. Nucor is beginning work on a new West Virginia mill. I think that's good news. You look at the glass side, Strategic Materials is out of bankruptcy. OI closed one plant, and it's pretty much reduced to another. Ardagh closed 2 plants last year. The bottom line, very simple, behind all these three, there's less demand for glass products. If you can't sell the bottles, why do you have the plants? So let's talk a little bit about market demand hints and where some of these markets are going. Michael gave you an excellent look at the economy and what he's seeing in economic trends. Holiday shopping was up. That was good. But it was the lowest increase since COVID. Global economy is not healthy. We actually appear to have one of the healthiest economies in the world. You look at a lot of the quarterly reports from the brands. They're all talking about revenue up. That's inflation. They're also all talking about unit sales going down. That's also inflation. And that's part of the problem we're seeing in the economy, especially on the plastic side. If those unit sales are down, you don't need the bottles, you don't need the cans, you don't need the packaging, you don't need the corrugated boxes to ship them in, because people aren't buying as much. So that continues to be a drag on these prices. The good news, the ISM Manufacturing Activity Index is up. It's up to 49, almost at the magic level of 50. The New Orders Index, which is purchasing managers predicting the future, predicting where they're going to be, where their activity is on new orders, it went above 50 for the first time in, I think, 16 months. They're saying, yeah, we see now, to me it may well be an indication that inventories truly are down for all those consumer brand companies. They know they need more boxes. They know they need more raw materials. So they're going to be making those new. And if that one holds true, that's very good news for where these items are going. Consumer sentiment, it's up. But consumer sentiment, when you really dig into it, is very weird. The way people say on one hand, we have a great economy, and they say on the other hand, meh, I just went to the grocery store, and I just saw what I paid at the grocery store. And it's very noticeable. And it gets back to, again, those quarterly reports from the brand companies. They say destocking is abating. They say their inventories are pretty much over now. And they're also saying they're seeing some increases in unit sales. So for recycling, that's great for markets. I hope they're accurate. Construction is down overall. However, infrastructure starts are up 25% year over year. And new home construction is on the increase. Now, new home construction and new home sales are very important because there's an intriguing correlation between the value of Kohler HDPE and those new home sales and new home construction, because again, the primary market for Kohler HDPE is pipes. It's pipes for water, it's pipes for sewage, because nobody cares whether the pipe is white, black, or some color in between, because you're never going to see it. So let's talk about, finally, markets, February and beyond, if you will. Paper has clearly buffered the impact of this economy in this last year on the value of products coming out of MRFs. I think they're great prices. They may go up a little bit more. We all know they won't last forever, but enjoy the ride while it's going on. I think generally through this year, we're going to see some decent prices for paper. The demand is there, and since we're seeing now a lot of the closures, not just economic downtime, but closures, that capacity is coming back into a healthier equation. Plastic prices, they're usually soft in the winter. Hey, they are. PET prices normally start to heat up in about a month as they start ordering for that summer season when bottled water sales and soft drink really rise. They should increase a little bit. Metal prices will stay solid. Trends to watch. What about destocking? What's happening with that? Just-in-time inventory. Now I'm reading it's hot again. I think just-in-time inventory will be great for recycling markets. It evens out the push and pull on supply and demand. It makes markets a little more rational. Mexico is now the biggest exporter of goods to the United States. That should be great for OCC. Why? There's a whole bunch of mills in Mexico that love your OCC. Container overcapacity, lower shipping rates for exports, but like I said, when they're shooting at your ships, you're going to take a much longer trip to get to your destination. And will construction pick up? There's a lot of uncertain stuff out there: student loan impact, higher credit card balances, dwindling household bank accounts, Ukraine, Israel, potential March government shutdown. They're not finished screwing around with this on the Hill. But economists do increasingly believe that we're going to have a soft landing, avoiding depression, avoiding a recession. And I tend to think they're right. I've been hearing that for 3 years. They got to be right eventually. I'd remind you that when I was here last year, I mentioned that I'm suing my alma mater because in my Econ 101 class, they never used the word pandemic. And I think I'm deprived in my understanding of economics by that. But then let's think about this. Nobody knew how to deal with a pandemic when it hit. I think we've done a decent job in this country managing this. I think we're really out of it. I think the longer term outlook for markets is good, but there's a lot of supply issues to resolve. And there's just a lot of the unexpected that I certainly wouldn't dare to predict today. But on the whole, I'm very optimistic. I thank you for your time, and have a good day.
So I don't know about y'all, but I'm kind of hearing some